Let me ask you something, and I need you to be brutally honest with yourself right now. When was the last time someone made you feel like you didn't matter? Like your words were just background noise, like your presence in the room was completely optional. Maybe it was this morning. Maybe it was your boss who cut you off mid-sentence in front of the entire team. Maybe it was a friend who canceled on you, again, with a 2-word text and 0 explanation. Maybe it was someone sitting right next to you at home who looked straight through you like you were a piece of furniture that had always been there. And here's what you did. You swallowed it. You told yourself it wasn't a big deal. You took a breath, you moved on, and you convinced yourself that letting it go was the mature thing to do. But here's what nobody tells you. Every single time you swallow that feeling, you are not being the bigger person. You are shrinking. Quietly, slowly, invisibly shrinking. And the people around you, they are taking notes. Whether they realize it or not, they are learning exactly how much they can get away with when it comes to you. By the time you finish listening to this, you won't just know how to respond to disrespect. You'll understand why it keeps finding you, and you'll have a complete, practical, and deeply human toolkit to make it stop. For good. Chapter 1. The Hidden Cost of Accepting Disrespect. Let's start with something uncomfortable. You already know when someone is disrespecting you. You feel it the second it happens. That tight, hot sensation in your chest. That moment where time slows down just a little and something inside you whispers, "That wasn't okay." You know. You always know. The problem isn't recognition. The problem is what you do next. Most people do one of 2 things. They either explode, they snap back, they raise their voice, they let the emotion take over, and suddenly they're the one who looks out of control. Or they go completely silent. They shrink back. They smile through it. They tell themselves that keeping the peace is more important than speaking up. And then they go home and replay the moment 17 times in their head at 2 in the morning, rehearsing all the things they should have said. Both of those responses have the same result. The disrespect continues, and it gets worse. Here's what I want you to really sit with for a moment. The cost of accepting disrespect is not just emotional. It's not just about hurt feelings or a bruised ego. The cost goes into every single corner of your life in ways you might not even be connecting right now. Think about your confidence. Every time you fail to stand up for yourself, you send a message directly to your own subconscious, not to the other person, to yourself. You tell yourself at a level deeper than words that you are not worth defending. And your brain, which is remarkably good at building belief systems based on evidence, starts to accept that as truth. It shows up in how you walk into a room. It shows up in how you speak when you're put on the spot. It shows up in the way you hesitate before sharing an idea. Because some part of you has already decided it probably won't be taken seriously anyway. That's not weakness. That's what prolonged disrespect does to a human being. It's cumulative, it's quiet, and it is devastating. Now think about the people around you. Here's something that might sting a little. Toxic people are extraordinarily good at reading rooms. They don't consciously think, "This person won't fight back, so I'll target them." It's more instinctive than that. They simply gravitate toward the path of least resistance. And if you've been the path of least resistance, they will keep walking all over you because you've shown them, through your consistent responses, that there are no real consequences for doing so. But it doesn't stop there. The people who could be genuinely good for you, the ones with high standards, strong values, and real self-respect, they're watching too. And when they see you absorbing poor treatment without response, they quietly recalibrate their impression of you. Not because they're judging you harshly, but because humans instinctively associate how you allow yourself to be treated with how you value yourself. And people with high standards want to be around other people who share those standards. This plays out in your career more than most people want to admit. The colleague who gets passed over for the leadership role, even though they're clearly the most capable person in the room, often it's not about skill. It's about presence. It's about the signal they send when they absorb criticism without response, when they let others take credit for their work, when they accept being talked over in meetings and just keep going. Organizations, like people, respond to the energy you project. And if your energy says, "I'll accept whatever you give me," that's exactly what you'll keep receiving. In your closest relationships, romantic partnerships, friendships, family, accepting disrespect does something particularly insidious. It breeds resentment on both sides. You start to resent the other person for how they treat you, and they, without even fully understanding why, begin to lose a certain kind of respect for you. Because deep down, people don't fully respect those who don't respect themselves. The relationship quietly hollows out from the inside, and one day you look at each other and realize the connection that was once there has been replaced by distance and unspoken frustration. And then there's your mental health. Chronic exposure to disrespect, especially in environments you can't easily leave, like your workplace or your family, creates a state of constant low-grade stress. You start second-guessing yourself. You become hyper-aware of other people's moods, always scanning for signs that something is about to go wrong. You walk on eggshells. You preemptively shrink yourself to avoid triggering someone else's bad behavior. This is not a sustainable way to live, and it is entirely unnecessary once you understand how this actually works. Here is the shift that changes everything, and I want you to really hear this. Respect is not something you earn by being good enough. Respect is something you generate by holding standards high enough. People don't respect you because you're kind to them. People don't respect you because you work hard or because you're talented or because you deserve it on paper. People respect you because you make it unmistakably clear through your words, your boundaries, your responses, and your energy that you respect yourself, that there are lines that cannot be crossed, that you are not endlessly available for poor treatment. When you begin operating from that understanding, things change fast. Some people will initially push harder. That's normal, and we'll talk about exactly why that happens and how to handle it. Some people will remove themselves from your life entirely, which sounds painful, but is actually one of the best things that can happen to you. And new people, better people, will start appearing because you're operating on a different frequency now, one that attracts quality. The cost of tolerating disrespect is your trajectory. Every year you spend accepting less than you deserve is a year spent moving in the wrong direction. The decision to change that starts right here, with understanding exactly what you're up against. Chapter 2. Recognizing disrespect in all its forms. Here's a question worth asking yourself. How often do you actually catch disrespect when it's happening? Most people only recognize it when it's loud. When someone raises their voice, insults them directly, or does something so obvious there's no way to misread it. But that kind of disrespect, the blatant, undeniable kind, is actually the least common. And in many ways, it's the least dangerous. Because at least you can see it clearly. The disrespect that really does the damage is the kind that's designed to make you question yourself. It's subtle, it's deniable, and it works precisely because you're not always sure if you imagined it. Let's walk through what it actually looks like in real life, because recognizing it is the first step to refusing it. There's the interruption pattern. And notice I said pattern, not incident. Everyone occasionally talks over someone by accident, especially in fast-moving conversations. That's not what we're talking about. The interruption pattern is when one specific person consistently either begins speaking the moment you start, raises their volume to drown you out, or waits until you've made half your point and then pivots the conversation as if you never spoke at all. Over time, this communicates something very clear. Your voice is less important than theirs. Your thoughts are less worthy of completion. There's the dismissal response. You share something, a concern, an idea, a feeling, and what you get back is some version of "that's not a big deal," or "you're overthinking it," or "I don't know why you're making this into a thing." The surface message sounds almost reasonable, but what's actually happening is that the other person is not engaging with what you said. They're dismissing your right to have said it. They're deciding on your behalf that your inner experience doesn't warrant attention. That's not a difference of opinion. That's a power move. There's time disrespect, which is enormous and criminally underrated as a form of disrespect. When someone is consistently late to things involving you, and I mean consistently as a pattern, they are communicating something about your place in their hierarchy of priorities. When someone cancels at the last minute without real explanation, when they make you wait while attending to things that feel more important to them, when they treat your schedule as infinitely flexible while their own is sacred, that's disrespect. Your time is one of the most finite resources you have. How someone treats it tells you everything about how they see you. There's the exclusion pattern. You find out about a meeting that directly involved your project after it happened. You notice the group chat that was created without you. You realize that decisions were made that affect you by people who didn't think to include you in the conversation. Sometimes this is genuinely an oversight, but when it happens repeatedly with the same people around the same kinds of situations, that's not forgetfulness. That's a deliberate, if sometimes unconscious, act of marginalization. There are micro-invalidations, and this one is particularly important because it tends to compound over time without ever crossing a clear line. Someone always double-checks your work, but not anyone else's. Someone explains basic concepts to you in a tone they'd never use with your peers. Someone asks, "Are you sure about that?" every single time you make a claim, regardless of how solid your expertise is in that area. Each individual moment seems minor. You can almost convince yourself you're reading too much into it. But the accumulation of these moments creates a very specific message that you are perceived as less competent, less reliable, or less capable than the people around you. Credit theft is another one that hits differently because of the professional stakes involved. This can be obvious. Someone presenting your work as their own in a meeting while you sit there quietly. But it can also be subtle. A manager who says, "We came up with this approach," when describing something you developed entirely on your own. Or a colleague who mentions a project's success without ever once acknowledging your contribution. Over time, this doesn't just sting emotionally, it actively damages your reputation, your advancement, and your sense of ownership over your own work. The patronizing communication style is one you'll recognize immediately once you name it. It's the colleague who explains things to you that you clearly already understand. It's the family member who talks to you like you're still 16, even though you're 38. It's the friend who prefaces every piece of advice with, "I don't know if you've thought about this," but as if independent thought is beyond your capability. This style is designed, consciously or not, to establish a hierarchy where they are the knowledgeable guide and you are the well-meaning but somewhat limited student. There's also what I'd call digital disrespect, which has become increasingly relevant. You notice that someone who responds to everyone else's messages within minutes takes 2 days to respond to yours, even when the matter is time-sensitive. You see them actively engaging with other people's content online while consistently passing over yours. They're available, just not for you. That selective unavailability communicates a priority ranking, and you're not at the top of it. Physical boundary violations matter here too. People who stand uncomfortably close, who touch you without asking, who position themselves in ways that feel controlling or cornering. Your physical comfort is a real thing, and someone who consistently dismisses it is someone who has decided that their physical preferences take precedence over your sense of safety. Now here's what I want you to take away from all of this. If you consistently feel uncomfortable, minimized, or drained after time with someone, trust that. Your nervous system is not confused. It's giving you information. The instinct to dismiss your own feelings as too sensitive or overreacting is often something you've been trained to do by the very people engaging in this behavior. Because making you doubt yourself is part of how the pattern stays in place. Start paying attention to patterns, not just moments. A single incident can be a misunderstanding. A recurring pattern across weeks or months is something else entirely. And once you can see it clearly, you can decide, with intention and clarity, what to do about it. Chapter 3. The Psychology Behind Why People Show Disrespect. Let's talk about something that might completely change how you experience disrespectful behavior going forward. When someone disrespects you, it feels personal. Of course it does. It's happening to you in your space, in your relationships, in your professional life. But here's the truth that took me a long time to really absorb. And I mean absorb it at a level where it actually changes how you respond. Not just something you intellectually agree with. Disrespect is never really about you, not even when it feels like it is aimed directly at you, not even when it uses your name, targets your specific choices, or zeroes in on something deeply personal. The behavior itself, the impulse behind it, the need it's serving, that is entirely about the other person. Understanding this doesn't mean you excuse it or accept it. It means you stop taking it into your identity. And that shift is enormously powerful. So let's look at what's actually driving it. The most common engine behind disrespectful behavior is insecurity. And I know that sounds like a cliché. They're just insecure. But stick with me, because when you really understand how insecurity operates, you see something important. People who are genuinely secure in their own value don't need to diminish yours. They simply don't. There's no psychological benefit to putting someone else down when you already feel solid in who you are. But when someone is deeply uncertain about their own competence, their own relevance, their own position, diminishing others becomes a subconscious shortcut to feeling elevated. They're not doing it because you're less than. They're doing it because they need to feel like they're more than. And right now, you happen to be in the room. So the next time someone dismisses your idea in a meeting or undercuts your confidence in front of others, ask yourself, what might they be afraid of losing? What about you feels threatening to them? The answers are usually revealing, and they shift your emotional response from wounded to curious, which is a much more powerful place to operate from. Power dynamics are the second major driver. Some people have grown up in environments, families, schools, workplaces, where respect was treated as a finite resource, where for one person to have status and authority, someone else had to have less. These individuals bring that zero-sum thinking into every relationship they enter. To them, treating you as an equal doesn't feel neutral. It feels like giving something away. So they use disrespect as a tool, not always consciously, to maintain the hierarchy they're most comfortable operating in. This is especially common in competitive workplaces, in families with rigid pecking orders, and in friendships where one person has historically held more social capital than the other. When you start showing up differently, with more confidence, more boundaries, more self-assurance, you disrupt the balance they've been depending on. And that disruption can trigger an escalation in their disrespectful behavior before it improves. We'll talk more about that shortly, because it's important you know it's coming so it doesn't knock you off course. Learned behavior is the third driver, and it's one that generates a particular kind of compassion once you understand it, without, and this is critical, requiring you to tolerate it. Many people who engage in chronic disrespect learned this as a survival strategy in early life. If you grew up in a household where dismissiveness was how adults communicated, where your emotional needs were consistently minimized, where raising your voice was the only way to be heard, you learn that these behaviors are normal. You carry them forward not because you're malicious, but because they're the only relational template you were given. This doesn't excuse the behavior. You are not responsible for healing someone else's childhood wounds. But it does mean that some disrespectful people aren't operating from cruelty. They're operating from a deeply ingrained script they've never been asked to examine. Understanding that can help you respond with strategic clarity, rather than taking it as a personal attack on your worth. Boundary testing is something that happens with almost everyone you meet, though most people never consciously register it. When someone new enters your life, a new colleague, a new partner, a new friend, there's an instinctive process of calibration happening. They're learning who you are, and part of that learning involves gently pressing against your edges to see where they are. This is often entirely unconscious. They're not thinking, "Let me find this person's limits." They're simply moving through the world the way they always do, and your responses, or lack thereof, are teaching them what's possible with you. The problem is that when you don't have clearly established, consistently enforced limits, boundary testing never stops. It just keeps going until it meets something firm. And if it never meets anything firm, the behavior escalates, not necessarily out of malice, but simply because nothing has indicated that it should stop. Control is another major driver. People who feel fundamentally out of control in their own lives, overwhelmed at work, unstable at home, anxious about their future, often try to compensate by exerting control over the people around them. They interrupt conversations because it's one place they can dominate. They dismiss your ideas because it gives them the power to direct outcomes. They violate your time boundaries because controlling your schedule gives them a small but real sense of authority. Recognizing control-based disrespect for what it is helps you stop absorbing it as a personal failing and start seeing it as someone else's coping mechanism. One that is not your problem to accommodate. There are also people driven by what psychologists call rejection sensitivity, a deep, often unconscious fear of being abandoned or pushed away. Paradoxically, these individuals sometimes act out in disrespectful ways as a form of preemptive self-protection. If they push you away before you can leave, the rejection feels more manageable because they initiated it. This manifests as disrespect because creating conflict and distance feels safer than risking genuine closeness and the vulnerability that comes with it. You're not dealing with someone who doesn't care. You're often dealing with someone who cares too much and doesn't have the tools to handle it. Narcissistic tendencies sit at the far end of this spectrum. People with significant narcissistic traits genuinely experience the world through a lens of entitlement and superiority. They're not being disrespectful because something went wrong in the interaction. Disrespect is simply how they navigate a world where they believe their needs and opinions naturally take priority. Appealing to their empathy rarely works, but strategic, consequence-based communication, which we'll cover in detail, does. Stress and overwhelm can turn ordinarily decent people into temporarily difficult ones. When someone is carrying an unsustainable load, professional pressure, health challenges, relationship strain, they often default to a kind of emotional survival mode. They become short, dismissive, impatient. This doesn't make it okay, but it does make it explainable. And the distinction between this person is in a rough season and this is a consistent pattern of how they treat me is an important one to make, because the response strategies are different. Finally, jealousy and competition drive enormous amounts of workplace disrespect in particular. If someone perceives you as a threat to their position, their visibility, or their sense of professional identity, they may engage in behavior designed to undermine your credibility before you can outshine them. This can be subtle, a comment here, a quiet undermining there, or it can be more overt. Either way, the source is fear. Your competence is triggering their insecurity. That's information worth having. Understanding all of this doesn't transform you into someone's therapist. It doesn't require you to absorb poor behavior with compassion and patience until the other person figures themselves out. What it does is give you a crucial advantage. You can respond to the behavior that's in front of you without losing yourself to it emotionally. Because when you know it's not about you, you stop defending your identity and start addressing the situation. And that's when you become genuinely effective. Chapter 4. Setting immediate boundaries when disrespect occurs. Here is one of the most important things you will take from this entire experience. The moment disrespect happens is the moment you must respond. Not tomorrow. Not in a carefully worded email you draft tonight. Not in the quiet of your car on the way home. Right then. In the moment. Because a delayed response to disrespect is indistinguishable from acceptance. And acceptance, as we've established, is an open invitation for more. I know what you might be thinking, but I don't know what to say. I don't want to make a scene. What if I overreact? These are real concerns, and they deserve real answers. But let me offer you a reframe first. The discomfort you feel about speaking up in the moment is temporary. The cost of not speaking up is permanent. Every time you let it pass, you pay with a small piece of your confidence, and those payments compound. The good news is this. You don't need a perfect response. You don't need a brilliant comeback or a carefully constructed argument. You just need to be clear, calm, and immediate. Let's break down what that actually looks like across different situations. When someone cuts you off mid-sentence, the response is simple. You stop. You make direct eye contact, not aggressive, not apologetic, just steady. And you say something like, "I wasn't finished." 3 words. No. Explanation required. No softening, no smile to make them feel better about being corrected. Just clear, factual, calm. I wasn't finished. If they try to continue speaking, you can add, "I'll need you to let me complete my thought." And then you wait. Silence. Let the weight of it sit. Don't rush to fill it. This feels uncomfortable at first. That discomfort is the social conditioning you've absorbed over years. The training that says keeping the peace is your responsibility. It's not. Respectful communication is a shared responsibility. You're simply reclaiming your half. When someone dismisses your idea or your concern, you address it directly, not defensively, directly. That concern is valid and it needs to be considered. Or, my input on this matters and I'd like it to be included in this conversation. Notice you're not asking permission. You're not requesting that they be nicer. You're stating a fact. Your perspective has value. And you're refusing to let the dismissal be the final word. This is a subtle but profound shift from how most people respond. Most people either go silent or get defensive. Going silent validates the dismissal. Getting defensive hands power to the other person because now the conversation is about your emotions rather than the substance of what you are saying. Calm, direct reassertion keeps you on solid ground. When someone is chronically late or consistently wastes your time, consequences become your most powerful tool. If someone is late to a meeting with you, again, you start without them, not as punishment, but as a simple demonstration that your time moves forward whether or not they honor it. If they cancel on you last minute, you don't automatically offer alternative times. You let them propose the next meeting. You say, I understand things come up, but last-minute changes affect my other commitments. Let me know when you have a time that works. You've acknowledged their reality without absorbing the consequences of their disorganization. When someone takes credit for your work, in a room, in a meeting, in a conversation, you correct the record immediately, in the moment, publicly if necessary. Actually, that approach came from something I proposed in last Tuesday's meeting. No anger, no accusation, just a clear, calm correction of the factual record. The longer you wait, the more the incorrect narrative solidifies. The moment it happens, you address it. When someone makes a dismissive or patronizing comment about your competence, you refuse the premise. I'm confident in my assessment. I don't need that explained to me. I have significant experience in this area. You're not being rude. You're being accurate. And you're closing the door on the dynamic they were trying to establish. For physical boundary violations, someone standing too close, touching you without invitation, positioning themselves in a way that feels controlling. Your response needs to be immediate and physical before it's verbal. Create the space you need. Step back. If they follow, then the words come, I need more space, please. Direct, clear, unapologetic. Now let's talk about how you say all of this, because your delivery matters as much as your words. Your tone should be even, not cold, not aggressive, not hurt, even, matter of fact. The tone of someone who is simply stating how things work in their world. Think of it the way you'd tell someone a factual piece of information, your office hours, your phone number, something that simply is what it is. That energy removes the emotional charge from the interaction and keeps you in a position of calm authority. Your body language needs to match. Shoulders back, eye contact held, not staring them down, just steady and present. No nervous laughing, no apologetic smile, no looking away. Your nonverbal communication is broadcasting your certainty about what you're saying. If your body is saying, I'm not sure I should be doing this, the other person will read that instantly and it will undermine your words. Do not over-explain your boundaries. This is one of the most common mistakes people make, and it comes from a deep-seated need to justify yourself to people who were never really asking for justification. You don't need a 3-paragraph explanation for why you expect to finish your sentences. Brief context is fine. Lengthy justification is an invitation for negotiation, and your boundaries are not negotiable. Expect pushback. When you start setting immediate, clear limits with people who have had unlimited access to you, they will push back. Some will be confused, some will be annoyed, some will escalate. And this escalation, which psychologists call an extinction burst, is actually a sign that your new behavior is working. It means the old pattern is under pressure. Stay consistent. Don't interpret the pushback as evidence that you were wrong to speak up. Interpret it as evidence that the boundary was necessary. Practice these responses. Literally rehearse them. In your car, in the mirror, in your head, before a meeting you're dreading. The reason most people freeze when disrespect happens is that they've never prepared a response. Their brain, in the moment, can't access one because it's never rehearsed one. Once you've practiced these phrases until they feel natural, they'll come to you in the moment without the freeze, without the regret, without the 2 a.m. replay. Every time you respond to disrespect immediately and calmly, you're doing two things simultaneously. You're training the other person, teaching them through direct experience what is and isn't acceptable with you. And you're training yourself, building evidence piece by piece that you are someone who stands up for your own value. That evidence accumulates. It changes how you carry yourself, and it changes how the world responds to you. Chapter 5. Strategic Responses for Different Types of Disrespectful People. Here's something most advice about handling disrespect gets completely wrong. It treats all disrespectful people as if they're the same, as if there's one universal response that works across every personality, every dynamic, every situation. There isn't. And using the wrong strategy, even with the best intentions, can make things significantly worse. What works with one type of person can backfire spectacularly with another. So before you respond, you need to read the room. You need to understand who you're actually dealing with. Because the most effective move depends entirely on what's driving the behavior in front of you. Let's walk through the main types you'll encounter and exactly how to handle each one. The aggressive intimidator. You know this person. They raise their voice. They use body language designed to make you feel small, leaning in too close, speaking over you, filling the room with their energy in a way that's clearly meant to dominate. They've discovered, probably early in life, that aggression works, that most people back down when the temperature rises. So they keep using it because it keeps getting them what they want. The absolute worst thing you can do with an aggressive intimidator is match their energy. If you raise your voice, you've entered their game. And it's a game they've been playing a lot longer than you have. You will not win it on their terms. The second worst thing you can do is visibly shrink, because that's the outcome they're engineering, and it confirms that the strategy works. What you do instead is the opposite of both. You lower your voice, not a whisper, a calm, deliberate, even tone that communicates complete absence of fear. You make steady eye contact. You slow your cadence down, and you say something like, "I can see you feel strongly about this. I need you to lower your voice before we continue." Then you wait, in silence, without flinching. If they don't comply, you don't argue, you don't escalate, you simply remove yourself from the interaction. We can pick this back up when you're ready to have a respectful conversation. And you leave, not dramatically, just clearly and calmly. This disrupts everything they've been counting on. They were expecting either submission or escalation. What they get instead is a wall of calm that their aggression can't penetrate. And crucially, you never, under any circumstances, give them what they want while they're being hostile. Not once. Because the moment you do, you've taught them that aggression is the shortcut to getting through to you. The passive-aggressive manipulator. This is the type that frustrates people most because their disrespect is specifically designed to be deniable. They make a comment that lands like an insult, but is technically just a sentence. They forget important things you've asked them to do repeatedly. They give you a compliment that somehow leaves you feeling worse than before they said anything. And when you try to address it, they look genuinely confused. I was just saying. I didn't mean it like that. You're reading too much into it. The strategy here is to refuse the deniability entirely. When they make a sarcastic comment, you don't react emotionally. You name it directly. That came across as sarcastic. What did you actually mean by that? You've forced them into a corner where they either have to explain themselves honestly or explicitly deny something you both know was intentional. Either way, you've made the subtext visible, and passive aggression loses most of its power the moment it's no longer sub. When they repeatedly forget things you've asked of them, you don't accept the forgetfulness at face value. You focus on the pattern and the solution. This is the third time this has happened. What system can we put in place so it doesn't happen again? You're not accusing them. You're not angry. You're simply refusing to keep absorbing the consequences of behavior that has a clear pattern. When they go silent, the cold shoulder, the deliberate non-response, you name that too. I've noticed you're not responding to my attempts to communicate. Let me know when you're ready to have a direct conversation. Then you disengage. You've acknowledged the behavior without chasing it. And chasing is exactly what they want, because it gives them continued power over your emotional state. The goal with passive-aggressive people is to consistently move the conversation from indirect to direct. Their entire strategy depends on the indirect channel staying open. Every time you name what's happening and request directness, you close that channel. Over time, they either learn to communicate honestly with you, or they move on to someone more willing to play the game. The narcissistic controller. This is perhaps the most challenging type to navigate, because the usual tools. Explaining how you feel, appealing to empathy, asking them to consider your perspective, simply don't land the way they would with most people. People with significant narcissistic tendencies genuinely experience themselves as the center of relevance in any given situation. Your feelings are not particularly interesting data to them. Your needs don't register with the same urgency as their own. So you stop trying to appeal to feelings they don't have access to, and you start focusing entirely on facts, outcomes, and consequences. When they take credit for your work, you correct the record factually. That approach came from the proposal I submitted on Wednesday. No emotion, no accusation, just the record, corrected. When they interrupt, you don't ask them to be kinder. You simply continue. I'll finish this thought, and then we can hear yours. When they dismiss your input, you reassert it without seeking their approval. My perspective needs to be part of this conversation. With narcissistic controllers specifically, you must set explicit consequences, and you must follow through on them immediately and without exception. If you interrupt me again, I'm going to end this meeting. And then, if they do it, you end the meeting. Not as a punishment, not dramatically, but cleanly and immediately, because they respond to power and to the reality of consequences. The moment they learn that your statements are always followed by action, the dynamic begins to shift. The insecure competitor. You've probably worked alongside this person, or maybe you've had them in your social circle. They can't quite let a moment pass without subtly repositioning themselves as more experienced, more successful, or more capable than you. They undercut your ideas with a half smile. They drop comments designed to make you second-guess yourself right before you need your confidence most. And underneath all of it is a fear so deep they may not even be conscious of it. The fear that they're not actually enough. The trap here is to start competing back, to feel the pull to prove yourself, to demonstrate your credentials, to match their energy. The moment you do that, you've entered their frame, and their frame is specifically designed for them to win. Instead, you do something counterintuitive. You opt out of the competition entirely. When they try to one-up you, you acknowledge it neutrally. That's interesting. And you redirect. You don't bite. You don't chase. When they question your competence, you state your qualifications simply and without defensiveness. I've been working in this area for 8 years, so I'm confident in this assessment. And then you move on. You don't need them to agree. You don't need them to validate your expertise. You know what you know. Your calm non-participation in their competition is actually the most powerful thing you can do, because the competition only exists if two people are playing. When you consistently refuse to engage, their strategy has nowhere to go. The boundary tester. This person isn't necessarily trying to harm you. They're simply accustomed to getting as much as people will give them, and they've never encountered a limit with you that actually held firm. They're late, because being late has worked before. They ask for last-minute favors because last-minute favors have always been provided. They cross the line because the line has always eventually moved. With boundary testers, your single most important tool is consistency. Not harshness, not confrontation, consistency. You say meetings start at 2 o'clock. You start at 2 o'clock whether they're there or not. You say you're not available after 7 in the evening. You don't answer messages after 7. You say you need 48 hours notice for schedule changes. You don't accommodate requests that come in the night before. The single most destructive thing you can do with a boundary tester is make an exception, because what you've actually taught them in that moment is not that you were being flexible. You've taught them that the rule isn't real, that if they push long enough or urgently enough, the limit will give way, and they will remember that. Every future boundary you try to set will be tested through that same lens. Consistency, applied with warmth and without drama, is enough. You don't need to explain at length. You don't need to be harsh. You simply need to be the same every time, regardless of their reaction. The emotional vampire. This one can be genuinely difficult because the manipulation is wrapped in emotional display. Tears, visible distress, claims of victimhood. They've learned, often very early in life, that emotional intensity is a lever that moves people. When confronted, they become the one who is suffering. When held accountable, they redirect to their own pain. And most people who are fundamentally decent and don't want to be the cause of someone's distress back down. You don't back down, but you do acknowledge. There's a very specific way to do both simultaneously. I can see that you're upset. and we still need to address the fact that the deadline was missed. Full stop. You've honored their emotional state. You've named it, you've acknowledged it as real, and you've kept the conversation on the actual issue. Their emotion is not a reason to drop the subject. Their distress is not evidence that your concern is invalid. You can hold both at once, genuine compassion for their feelings and firm clarity about what still needs to be addressed. The key is to never let their emotional state become the subject of the conversation when the subject of the conversation is their behavior. Acknowledge and redirect every time. Chapter 6. The Power of Strategic Withdrawal. Let's talk about one of the most misunderstood moves in your entire toolkit: walking away. Most people have been conditioned to think of walking away as losing, as giving up, as handing the other person the win by removing yourself from the field. But strategic withdrawal, done deliberately, done cleanly, done at the right moment, is one of the most powerful moves available to you, and most people never use it because they've never understood what it actually is. Strategic withdrawal is not running away. It is not passive. It is not conflict avoidance. It is a calculated, intentional decision to remove your energy, your attention, and your presence from someone who has demonstrated, through consistent behavior, not a single bad day, that they do not value what you bring to the table. It is a consequence, and consequences, as we've established, are how people learn. Here's the mechanism that makes it work. Disrespectful people, particularly the chronic kind, feed on your reaction. They need your engagement. The drama, the conflict, the visible impact of their behavior on your emotional state, that's the fuel. When you remove that fuel by withdrawing your presence and your response, you don't just inconvenience them. You eliminate the thing their behavior was designed to produce. And without that payoff, the behavior often loses its purpose. More importantly, you protect yourself. You stop absorbing damage. You stop showing up to an environment that is actively costing you your confidence, your energy, your mental health, and you redirect those resources toward people and spaces that actually add to your life. In professional settings, strategic withdrawal might look like moving your communication with a specific colleague entirely to email. You're not being hostile. You're simply creating a structure that removes the opportunity for the in-person interruptions, the dismissive tone, the intimidation tactics. You stop sharing ideas informally with the person who consistently takes credit for them. You become professionally cordial, pleasant in the hallway, responsive to what's required, and completely unavailable for anything beyond that minimum. If a supervisor is the source of chronic disrespect, strategic withdrawal requires more careful architecture because of the power imbalance. You start documenting everything. You request written confirmation of instructions and decisions. You limit face-to-face interaction where possible and begin, quietly and intentionally, building your network and your options. Because protecting yourself sometimes means creating the ability to leave. In personal relationships, strategic withdrawal looks different. It might mean declining invitations with people who consistently leave you feeling worse than when you arrived. It might mean becoming significantly more selective about what personal information you share with someone who has a history of using your vulnerabilities against you. It might mean reducing contact frequency, not with a dramatic announcement, just with a quiet, consistent shift in availability. The timing of strategic withdrawal is crucial. It is not a first response. You communicate clearly first. You set boundaries. You give the other person a genuine opportunity to change the dynamic. Strategic withdrawal is what happens when that opportunity has been extended and not taken, or when the disrespect is severe enough that immediate distance is necessary before any other strategy can be applied. Before you implement it, prepare yourself for what's likely to happen next. Some people will escalate. They'll push harder, reach out more, attempt to re-engage through pressure or guilt. Others will try the opposite. They'll suddenly become warm, attentive, apologetic. They'll make promises. They'll tell you you're being unreasonable or dramatic, or that you're hurting them by pulling back. Here's what you need to know about all of those responses. They are information. Someone who genuinely respects you will understand your need for space and will do the work required to address what created that need. Someone who does not, who pressures you, guilt trips you, or weaponizes your withdrawal to make you the villain, is showing you exactly why the withdrawal was necessary in the first place. If someone re-engages with what seems like improved behavior, don't rush back to previous levels of access and intimacy. Changed behavior needs time to demonstrate that it's real. Weeks of improvement after years of disrespect is a start, not a destination. You move slowly. You watch the patterns. Sustainable change reveals itself over time, not in a single good week. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, strategic withdrawal becomes permanent. Some people are not going to change. Some relationships are not going to become healthy, no matter how clearly you communicate or how consistently you enforce consequences. Accepting that, really accepting it, not just saying the words, is one of the most emotionally difficult things you can do. But it is also one of the most liberating. Because the space that opens up when you remove a chronically disrespectful relationship from your life is not empty for long. It fills with something better. You are not obligated to maintain relationships that damage you, not out of history, not out of loyalty, not out of the fear that something better won't come along. Strategic withdrawal, at its most fundamental level, is an act of self-respect. It is you deciding that your mental health, your peace, and your energy matter enough to protect. And that decision, more than any single conversation or boundary-setting moment, is what changes the entire trajectory of how you move through the world. Chapter 7. Building unshakable inner confidence that commands respect. Here's something worth saying plainly before we go any further. Every strategy we've covered, the immediate responses, the boundary setting, the withdrawal, the personality-specific approaches, all of it is built on a foundation. And if that foundation isn't solid, the strategies wobble. They feel forced. They come out defensive instead of confident. People can feel the difference, and so can you. That foundation is inner confidence, not the performance of confidence, not the costume of it, the real thing, the deep, quiet, unshakable knowing of your own worth that doesn't rise and fall based on whether someone approved of you today. And here's what I want you to understand about real confidence before we talk about how to build it. It has nothing to do with arrogance. Arrogance is loud because it's compensating for something. Real confidence is quiet because it doesn't need to prove anything. It's not about believing you're better than other people. It's about being so clear on your own value that other people's opinions of you become interesting, but not defining. When you operate from that place, something remarkable happens. You stop reacting and start responding. You stop seeking permission and start making decisions. And the people around you, even people who have never thought consciously about any of this, feel it. They adjust because humans are extraordinarily sensitive to the energy of self-assurance, and they respond to it instinctively with respect. So, how do you build it? Not perform it. Actually build it. The first distinction worth making is between self-esteem and self-respect, because these are not the same thing, and most people treat them as if they are. Self-esteem is how you feel about yourself. And feelings, as you know, are variable. They go up when things go well and down when things go badly. If your confidence is built on self-esteem alone, it will fluctuate with your circumstances, which means it will be at its lowest exactly when you need it most, in high-pressure moments, in conflict, when someone is challenging you. Self-respect is different. Self-respect is behavioral. It's the standards you hold for your own actions and the standards you require from others. And it remains consistent regardless of whether you're having a good day or a terrible one. When you consistently act in alignment with your values, when you keep the promises you make to yourself, when you refuse poor treatment, even on the days when you're feeling least equipped to push back, you build self-respect. And self-respect is what generates the kind of confidence that doesn't collapse under pressure. One of the most important shifts you can make is developing what psychologists call an internal locus of control. This is the deep belief that your choices and actions have genuine power to influence your circumstances and outcomes. Its opposite, an external locus of control, is the belief that your life is primarily shaped by luck, by what other people decide, by forces outside your influence. People who operate from an external locus of control often develop a kind of passive victimhood around their experiences. Things happen to them. They wait to see how others will treat them, and that waiting, that passivity, actually invites disrespectful treatment. When you shift to an internal locus, you start asking different questions. Not, why is this person treating me this way, but what response do I choose to have here? Not, when will things get better, but what action can I take today? This shift is not about pretending you control everything. You don't. It's about directing your energy toward what you can influence rather than expending it on what you can't. Competence is another underappreciated pillar of genuine confidence. It is genuinely difficult to feel confident in areas where you know you're underprepared. And it's equally difficult to feel insecure when you know your craft deeply. Investing in your skills, in the specific areas that matter to your goals, your career, your relationships, creates a bedrock of competence that external criticism struggles to shake. When someone tries to undermine your professional credibility and you know your subject matter cold, their attempt slides off. Not because you've built emotional armor, but because you have actual knowledge to stand on. Your physical presence communicates your inner state before you say a single word. And here's the part that surprises people. It works in both directions. The way you carry your body not only communicates confidence to others, it generates confidence within you. Shoulders back, head level, eye contact held comfortably, movement that's deliberate rather than rushed or hesitant. These physical adjustments create neurological changes. Your brain reads your posture and adjusts your internal state accordingly. This isn't pseudoscience. It's how embodied cognition works. Start with the outside, and the inside follows. Mental rehearsal is one of the most underused tools available to you. Before a meeting you're anxious about, before a conversation you've been avoiding, before any situation where you anticipate the need to hold your ground, close your eyes and run through it. Not the version where it goes badly, the version where you are exactly who you want to be. Calm, clear, grounded, responding from your values rather than from fear. Your brain, at a neurological level, doesn't perfectly distinguish between a vividly imagined experience and a real one. The rehearsal prepares the neural pathways for the real performance. The internal dialogue you run constantly, the voice that narrates your experience as you move through your day, has an enormous influence on your confidence. Most people have inherited a critical inner voice that was shaped by the harshest things they heard about themselves growing up, in school, in early relationships. That voice tells you you're not quite enough, that you're probably being too much, that you should be grateful for whatever treatment you receive because maybe you don't deserve better. Start noticing that voice, not to silence it. Suppression doesn't work, but to examine it. Ask it for evidence. When it tells you that you're not worth defending, ask it to substantiate the claim. When it tells you that speaking up will make things worse, ask it how it knows that. Most of the time, the critical inner voice is operating on old information and outdated evidence. Replacing it doesn't mean becoming unrealistically positive. It means becoming accurate, fair, based on what's actually true about you right now, not on the worst version of you from the hardest period of your life. The people you spend significant time with are either building your confidence or eroding it. This isn't a small variable. It's one of the most powerful environmental factors in your psychological life. If your daily relational landscape is primarily made up of people who criticize, dismiss, compete with, or undermine you, maintaining confidence is swimming upstream. Conversely, when you're regularly around people who genuinely see your value, who call out your strengths, who engage with your ideas seriously and treat your boundaries with respect, your confidence grows almost automatically. Be intentional about this. It matters more than most people acknowledge. Take calculated risks. Start small if you need to. A conversation you've been avoiding, a boundary you've been hesitant to set, a situation where you speak up instead of staying quiet. Each time you do something that required courage and survive it, especially when it turns out better than your fear predicted, you build what psychologists call self-efficacy, evidence gathered by your own experience that you can handle challenging situations. That evidence compounds over time. It becomes the foundation of a confidence that doesn't need external validation because it's built on your own track record. Celebrate your progress. This sounds small, but it's psychologically significant. Most people move immediately from one accomplishment to the next goal without pausing to register what they've achieved. Their brain never gets the data point that says, "I did that." Start acknowledging your wins, the moments you held your ground, the conversations you navigated well, the boundaries you set and enforced. These are evidence of your capability. Let your brain receive them as such. Confidence is not a destination. You don't arrive at it one day and then coast. It's a practice, ongoing, imperfect, requiring attention and maintenance. There will be days when you feel solid and days when the old doubts surface. That's not failure, that's being human. The goal is a foundation stable enough that even on the harder days, your core sense of worth remains intact. And that foundation is built one choice at a time. Every time you respect yourself enough to require that others do the same. Chapter 8. Handling Disrespect in Family Relationships. Let me say something that might feel uncomfortable at first, but that I think you need to hear. The fact that someone is family does not give them permission to treat you poorly. That seems obvious when it's stated plainly, but in practice, in the complicated, emotionally loaded reality of actual family dynamics, most people operate as if exactly the opposite is true, as if the blood connection creates an obligation to absorb treatment that you would never accept from anyone else in your life, as if family loyalty and self-respect are somehow in conflict and loyalty has to win. They're not in conflict. Real family loyalty, the kind that's actually healthy, includes respecting each other. And when it doesn't, the relationship isn't being preserved by your silence. It's being slowly destroyed by it. Family disrespect is particularly complicated for a few reasons. First, the patterns are often ancient. They were established when you were young, when you had no framework for recognizing them and no power to address them. By the time you're old enough to see them clearly, they've been normalized for decades. Challenging them feels not just uncomfortable, but somehow wrong, like you're breaking a rule that was never written down but was always understood. Second, the emotional investment is enormous. These are people you love, often people you've loved your whole life. The idea of creating conflict with them or of limiting the relationship carries a weight that doesn't exist with colleagues or acquaintances. And that weight, that deep reluctance to disturb the connection, is exactly what makes the pattern so hard to break. Third, families are experts at your specific emotional triggers. Because they've known you the longest, they know exactly which buttons to press, which guilt trips land hardest, which appeals to loyalty will make you second-guess yourself. A colleague can make you feel bad. A family member can make you feel like the worst version of yourself in 30 seconds flat. The most common form of family disrespect is emotional manipulation, and it usually comes wrapped in the language of love. After everything I've done for you, I'm only saying this because I care. You're breaking this family apart. These phrases are designed to make you feel that asserting your needs is an act of aggression against the people who love you. It's not. Asserting your needs is a basic human right, and someone who tells you otherwise even with genuine love in their heart, is using that love as a lever. Invalidation is another pattern that runs deep in family systems. You're too sensitive. That's not how it happened. You've always been dramatic. These responses don't engage with what you said. They question your right to have said it. They position your inner experience as the problem rather than the behavior you were responding to. Over time, this kind of invalidation teaches you to distrust your own perception, which is one of the most damaging things that can happen to a person's psychological development. When you're ready to address family disrespect, and choosing when you're ready is entirely yours to decide. The most important thing to bring into the conversation is specificity, not "you've never respected me." That's a verdict, and verdicts create defensiveness. Specific behavior, specific change requested. When you make comments about my career choices in front of other people, it feels dismissive, and I need it to stop. Concrete, actionable, clear. Stay focused during these conversations. Family members who are skilled at manipulation will attempt to derail the conversation in a dozen different directions, bringing up past grievances, questioning your motives, becoming emotional in ways designed to shift the focus onto their pain rather than the pattern you're addressing. Your job is to stay on the specific issue. You can acknowledge their feelings without letting those feelings become the subject of the conversation. I hear that you're upset. I still need us to address what I came to talk about. Prepare for the triangle. When you start setting limits with family members, they will sometimes recruit other relatives, bringing siblings or cousins or extended family into the dynamic, recruiting people to pressure you back into compliance. Do not engage with the triangle. Do not defend yourself to third parties who are told a version of events that serve the other person's narrative. Address issues directly with the person involved and let the triangle stand without you in it. Sometimes the necessary response to family disrespect is distance, temporary, or permanent. This is one of the most emotionally painful decisions a person can make, and I want to name that honestly. There is grief in limiting contact with family members, even when it's clearly the right thing for your mental health. Society sends very clear messages about family obligation, that blood is irreplaceable, that cutting off family is a failure, that the right thing is always to keep trying. Those messages are not always true, and believing them unconditionally can keep you locked in dynamics that genuinely damage you. Your mental health is not less important than a family relationship. Your peace is not less valuable than preserving a connection that consistently costs you. Some family members will never change, no matter how clearly you communicate, no matter how consistently you enforce limits. And accepting that, really accepting it, is not giving up. It's being honest about reality, so you can make decisions based on what's actually true, rather than what you hope might eventually happen. Healing from family disrespect almost always benefits from professional support. The patterns established in family systems are among the deepest and most complex that humans carry. Therapist who specializes in family dynamics can help you see the patterns clearly, grieve what was lost or never existed, and build the kind of relationship with yourself that makes healthy connections possible going forward. If you've been considering it, consider this a gentle nudge. There's no award for doing this entirely alone. And hold on to this. Setting limits with family members is not a betrayal of the relationship. In many cases, it is the only thing that gives the relationship a genuine chance at becoming something healthy. Because relationships built on enabling and resentment don't thrive. They just persist. And persisting is not the same as flourishing. Chapter 9. Recovering your self-worth after prolonged, disrespectful treatment. If you've spent months or years in an environment, a relationship, a workplace, a family dynamic, where disrespect was the consistent climate, I want to speak directly to you for a moment. What happened to you was not neutral. It left marks. And acknowledging that is not weakness. It's the first honest step toward actually healing rather than just moving on. When disrespect is prolonged and consistent, it does something specific to your psychology. It doesn't just hurt your feelings in the moment, it gradually reshapes how you see yourself. The brain, which is designed to find patterns and construct meaning from experience, starts to accept the repeated message. When someone consistently treats you as if your thoughts don't matter, part of you starts to wonder if they're right. When someone consistently dismisses your feelings, you begin to preemptively dismiss them yourself. When someone consistently positions you as less capable, less worthy, less deserving, you internalize it. Not because you're naive, but because you're human. Psychologists call one element of this learned helplessness. The gradual internalization of the belief that you cannot influence your circumstances, that your responses don't matter, that things will be the way they'll be regardless of what you do. It develops in environments where effort consistently fails to produce change, and it doesn't stay contained to the relationship or environment where it formed. It bleeds into other areas of your life, shaping how you approach challenges, opportunities, and new relationships. The critical inner voice that develops from prolonged disrespect is particularly insidious because it sounds like you. It uses your voice, your vocabulary, your specific anxieties. Don't say that. They'll think you're stupid. Don't ask for that. You don't deserve it. Don't trust your instincts. You always get it wrong. This voice is not you. It is a composite of the harshest messages you absorbed from the people who disrespected you. And recognizing that, truly recognizing that the voice is borrowed rather than native, is one of the most powerful moments in recovery. The starting point is this. What happened to you was not a reflection of your worth. I know those words can feel hollow when you're deep in the residue of prolonged disrespect. The mind that has been convinced otherwise doesn't shift just because someone says the opposite. So let's go deeper than the statement and talk about how you actually rebuild. Start by identifying the specific beliefs that formed during the period of disrespectful treatment. Write them down, if you can. My opinions aren't valuable. I cause problems for people. I'm too much. I'm not quite enough. Whatever version of the message took root, name it, because you cannot challenge what you haven't named. Once it's visible, you can examine it. Where did it come from specifically? Was it true before that relationship or environment? What evidence exists that contradicts it? The process of rebuilding self-worth requires generating new evidence. Not just thinking differently, acting differently in small and concrete ways, and registering the outcomes. This means completing things you committed to, making decisions and following through on them, setting a small boundary and honoring it, helping someone in a way that draws on your specific strengths. Each of these moments, however minor they seem, is a data point, a piece of counter-evidence to the narrative that was installed by someone else's poor treatment. Your brain updates its belief systems based on experience. Give it new experiences to update from. Self-compassion is not optional during this process. It's structural. Many people who have experienced prolonged disrespect have absorbed not just the external criticism, but the underlying standard that they should be perfect in order to deserve better treatment, that if they had just been different somehow, the disrespect wouldn't have happened. This thinking keeps you trapped. You don't heal from disrespect by finally becoming good enough that you deserved better all along. You heal by recognizing that you deserved better, regardless that the disrespect was about the other person, not your adequacy. Treat yourself the way you would treat a close friend who told you what you've been through. You wouldn't tell that friend that they should have handled it better, or that maybe the other person had a point, or that they're taking too long to recover. You would extend patience, warmth, genuine care, extend that to yourself intentionally. It will feel awkward at first if self-compassion is unfamiliar. Do it anyway. Reconnecting with your authentic self is another crucial part of recovery that often gets overlooked. Prolonged disrespect frequently involves other people's narratives about who you are overriding your own. You've been told what you think, what you feel, what you're capable of, what you want, often by people with a strong interest in you believing a version of yourself that kept you compliant and small. Part of healing is the quiet, patient work of rediscovering your own preferences. What do you actually enjoy? Not what were you told you should enjoy. What matters to you? Not what were you shamed into valuing. What kind of life do you actually want to build? Surround yourself with people who treat you well. This sounds simple, but it's genuinely foundational. If you've come from an environment of chronic disrespect, your nervous system has calibrated to that as normal. Respectful treatment can actually feel unfamiliar, even suspicious, at first. Being around people who engage with you warmly, who take your ideas seriously, who treat your time and your feelings as worth consideration, recalibrates that baseline. It shows you, in lived experience rather than theory, what the alternative actually feels like, and it makes it harder to accept less going forward. Recovery is not linear. There will be days when you feel genuinely stronger and days when the old wounds are closer to the surface. A comment from a new person that echoes the old pattern can knock you back further than you expected. A moment of failure can activate the old internal critic with unexpected force. This is not evidence that you're not healing. It's evidence that healing is a process, not an event. The overall trajectory, measured in months, not moments, is what matters. And hold this truth close as you move forward. You survived something genuinely hard. That survival required resilience you may not have fully acknowledged. You are not starting from zero. You are starting from a place of hard-won experience, of knowing what you don't want and beginning to claim what you do. The work of recovery is not just returning to who you were before. It's building someone stronger, someone with clearer limits and deeper self-knowledge and a harder-won understanding of their own worth. That person is already in the process of becoming. You're reading this because some part of you already knows it's time. Chapter 10. Advanced Psychological Strategies for Command and Influence. You've come a long way in this journey. You understand what disrespect looks like, why it happens, how to respond to it in the moment, and how to rebuild when it's already done damage. Now we go deeper. Because once you've built the foundation, the boundaries, the inner confidence, the recovery, there's a next level available to you. A level where you're not just defending yourself against disrespect, but actively positioning yourself as someone who naturally commands respect before a word is spoken. Where the game shifts from reactive to proactive. Where disrespect becomes genuinely rare in your life, not because the world has changed, but because you have. These are advanced strategies. They require the earlier work as a base. But when that base is solid, these principles become extraordinarily powerful. The starting point is understanding something fundamental about how respect actually operates in social dynamics. Respect, at its core, is about perceived value. People extend respect to those they perceive as valuable, competent, and confident in their own worth. And here's the part that changes everything. That perception is shaped far more by how you present yourself than by your objective credentials or achievements. This is not an invitation to be fake. It's an invitation to stop hiding the real value you already carry. One of the most powerful dynamics in social psychology is social proof. People look to the behavior of others for cues about how to act, including how to treat you. When you consistently maintain high standards and refuse to accept poor treatment in public, you create a social signal. The people who witness that interaction learn something about you. They learn that certain treatment is not available with you, and that information travels. New people enter your environment having already received cues, directly or indirectly, about what to expect. Your reputation, which we'll talk about more shortly, begins operating on your behalf even in rooms you haven't entered yet. This is why it's so critical to never let disrespect slide in group settings. Every person who witnesses you absorbing poor treatment without response receives the same lesson. That treatment is acceptable with you, and every person who witnesses you addressing it calmly and clearly receives the opposite lesson. You're not just managing one interaction. You're shaping the social understanding of who you are across an entire environment. The strategic use of contrast is another advanced principle worth understanding. When you consistently maintain composure, when you stay calm in situations where others become emotional, when you hold your standards while others compromise theirs, when you respond thoughtfully where others react impulsively, you create a visible contrast. You don't need to point it out. The contrast speaks for itself. And it positions you in the perception of everyone watching as someone who operates at a different level, someone worth paying attention to, someone worth treating with care. Controlled vulnerability is a more sophisticated tool than most people realize. The common assumption is that showing any weakness undermines authority and invites exploitation. But done strategically, vulnerability actually deepens credibility. When you acknowledge a genuine limitation, I don't have expertise in that specific area, but here's what I do know. While demonstrating overall competence, people trust you more, not less. Because you're demonstrating that your confidence isn't a performance. You're secure enough to be honest about your edges. That security reads as authentic authority. And authentic authority commands genuine respect. Presupposition is a subtle but powerful communication technique that most people never consciously deploy. It's the difference between phrasing that assumes cooperation and phrasing that requests it. When you say, "Could you please let me finish before you respond?" you're framing the other person's interruption as something that might or might not happen. You're asking them to choose. When you say, "I'll complete this thought, and then I'd love to hear yours," you're speaking as if their patience is already a given. You've presupposed the respectful behavior rather than negotiating for it. This subtle shift changes the entire framing of the interaction, and people respond to frames more than they realize. Frame control is perhaps the most sophisticated of all the advanced strategies. Every interaction happens within a frame, a set of assumptions about who the people involved are, what their relative status is, and what kinds of behavior are appropriate. Disrespectful people are often skilled, consciously or not, at establishing frames that position you as subordinate. Your job is to refuse that frame and establish your own. When someone is consistently late to meetings with you and frames it as simply how they operate, you can reframe without confrontation. "I know how packed your schedule gets, so let's make sure we use our time together as efficiently as possible." And then you start on time regardless. You've acknowledged their reality without accepting its implication that your time is less valuable. You've operated from your own frame rather than theirs. The strategic use of silence is one of the most underused tools available to you in any high-stakes interaction. Most people are deeply uncomfortable with silence and rush to fill it with explanations, with softening language, with backpedaling. When you make a point, set a boundary, or ask a direct question, and then stop talking and wait, you create psychological space that the other person feels compelled to fill. That compulsion shifts the dynamic. You're no longer the one working to make the interaction move, they are. And whoever is most comfortable with silence holds the most power in that moment. Practice being comfortable with silence. It feels unbearable at first. It becomes one of your most reliable tools. The principle of strategic scarcity is about the genuine, non-manipulative reality that your time and attention are limited and should be treated as such. When you're endlessly available to everyone, your availability has no particular value. When people have to earn your attention, not through games, but through genuine selectivity about where you invest your energy, they value it differently. They prepare more carefully for time with you. They treat interactions with more intentionality. The scarcity isn't manufactured. It's simply what happens when you stop being infinitely accessible and start being genuinely present with the people and situations that deserve your full engagement. Building strategic alliances is another advanced practice that operates below most people's radar. Every environment has people whose respect carries social weight, whose opinion influences others, whose endorsement shifts perceptions, whose behavior toward you sets a tone that others follow. Cultivating genuine relationships with those individuals, not through flattery or positioning, but through real mutual appreciation and value exchange, creates a layer of social protection and credibility that works on your behalf passively. When respected people treat you with respect, it recalibrates how others see you automatically. Emotional regulation under pressure is what ultimately separates people who are genuinely respected from those who are merely feared or tolerated. When you can remain calm, clear, and composed in the moments when others are trying to provoke, destabilize, or overwhelm you, that self-possession is magnetic. It communicates a level of internal security that most people find genuinely impressive because most people don't have it. They want to be around it. They want to align with it, and they instinctively treat it with deference. This doesn't mean becoming emotionless or detached. It means developing the capacity to feel the emotion, to register it, to acknowledge it internally, and to choose your response rather than being driven by it. That gap between stimulus and response is where your power lives. The wider that gap becomes through practice, the more effectively you command the room. Chapter 11. Creating a reputation that precedes you. Your reputation is working for you or against you right now, in rooms you're not in conversations you're not part of, in the minds of people you haven't yet met. It's one of your most powerful assets, and most people never think about it intentionally. A reputation for maintaining high standards, for being someone who neither dishes out disrespect nor absorbs it, creates a social environment around you where disrespectful behavior becomes genuinely awkward. People who might otherwise test your limits don't bother because the word is already out that there's no point. The expectation of mutual respect precedes you, and that expectation does an enormous amount of work on your behalf before you've said a single word. Building this kind of reputation starts with one principle above all others: consistency. Not perfection, consistency. Your standards need to be predictable enough that people can learn them and rely on them. This means maintaining those standards even when it's inconvenient, even when you're tired, even when no one important seems to be watching. Especially then, because that's when character is actually revealed, and people notice character even when they don't appear to be looking. The foundation of a respect-commanding professional reputation is built on three things happening reliably over time. You deliver excellent work, you treat people fairly, and you maintain clear limits about how you're treated. The combination of these three, the competence, the integrity, and the self-respect, creates someone that organizations and individuals don't want to lose, and people treat differently those they can't afford to lose. How you speak about yourself matters enormously. People who command genuine respect have a particular relationship with self-description. They acknowledge their strengths without false modesty and without arrogance. They're honest about what they do well and honest about where they're still developing. This combination, confident and honest simultaneously, is rare and recognizable. It signals someone who doesn't need external validation to feel solid, which is one of the most respect-generating qualities a person can have. How you speak about others matters just as much. People who consistently badmouth colleagues, gossip about peers, or engage in character assassination might find it socially enjoyable in the short term, but over time, it shapes how others perceive them. Because if you talk that way about other people, it's only a matter of time before you talk that way about them. The people worth respecting and being respected by are watching, and they notice. How you handle conflict becomes a central part of your reputation narrative. When you can disagree firmly, clearly, without getting personal, and emerge from the disagreement with the relationship intact, you establish yourself as someone emotionally sophisticated and professionally mature. When you can hold a position under pressure without becoming hostile or defensive, people learn that you can be trusted with difficult conversations. And the people who can be trusted with difficult conversations are the ones given access to important things. How you treat people who have no power over you is perhaps the most revealing element of your character and your reputation. The way you interact with someone who is new or junior or working in a service role tells everyone around you whether your respectful treatment of important people is genuine or strategic. When people see you treating everyone with basic decency and consideration, they understand that your respect is real, and real respect generates real respect in return. Your digital presence has become an extension of your professional and personal reputation in ways that didn't exist a generation ago. The tone of your written communications, the way you engage with disagreement online, the things you choose to respond to publicly, all of it contributes to the overall picture. The same standards that serve you in person serve you digitally. Calm, direct, never punching down, never engaging in public drama, never allowing someone to provoke you into behavior that costs you more than it costs them. The stories people tell about you are your reputation in motion. When you handle a challenging situation with grace, when you address disrespect calmly and effectively, when you stand up for someone else who's being treated poorly, when you navigate a genuine conflict with integrity, those moments get remembered and repeated. They become part of how people understand who you are. You can't manufacture these moments, but you can be intentional enough about your values and your responses that when they happen naturally, they tell the story you'd want told. Professional visibility, being present in contexts where your character and competence can be observed, is another element of reputation building that requires intentionality. This might mean taking on challenging projects where your capabilities are visible, contributing substantively in environments where your ideas can be evaluated, stepping into leadership when the situation calls for it. The goal isn't to perform for an audience, it's to give your real qualities opportunities to be seen. Quality of association matters here too. The people you align yourself with professionally and socially communicate something about your standards and your judgment. This isn't about being calculating about friendships. It's about being conscious that the company you keep reflects and reinforces how others perceive you. People who are known for integrity, competence, and strong values will naturally enhance the perception of others who choose to be around them. And the reverse is equally true. Remember that reputation building is inherently long-term. You cannot shortcut it with a single impressive interaction or a carefully managed image. It accumulates over time through hundreds of small, consistent choices. How you show up when it's easy and how you show up when it's hard. The investment is gradual, but the dividend, an environment where respect is your default experience rather than something you have to earn or fight for, is worth every year of intentional effort it takes to build it. Chapters 12 to 15. Teaching others, building mutual respect, and the final mindset shift. We're coming to the end of this journey together, and I want to use this final section not to introduce entirely new concepts, but to bring everything together into the integrated understanding that makes all of it sustainable, not just a set of techniques you apply, but a way of moving through the world that becomes genuinely natural. Teaching others how to treat you is happening whether you're aware of it or not. Every response you give or don't give to every interaction you have is providing information. Information about where your limits are, what you'll absorb, what you'll address, what matters to you and what doesn't. People are constantly updating their understanding of you based on this information. The question isn't whether you're teaching them. It's whether you're teaching them intentionally. The most powerful teaching tool you have is consistency. When someone experiences the same clear, calm response from you across multiple situations and time periods, they learn something they actually believe. Not just a rule that might change, a reality about who you are. Inconsistency is what keeps the lesson from landing. Every exception you make to your own standards is a lesson that the standards are negotiable. And people who are testing your limits will remember that exception long after you've forgotten it. Begin as you mean to go on. The tone established in the early stages of any relationship, professional, personal, romantic, tends to persist. If you absorb poor treatment in the first weeks because you don't want to create conflict before trust is established, you've established something far more significant than trust. You've established the baseline expectation. Starting as you mean to continue with clarity, warmth, and clear limits is not aggression. It's honesty about who you are from the beginning. Building relationships based on mutual respect is not just about protecting yourself from disrespect. It's about creating something genuinely worth having. Because the goal was never just to suffer less. The goal was always to live and connect at a level that actually fulfills you. Mutual respect, the real kind, where both people genuinely regard each other's time, feelings, and needs as worth consideration, is the foundation of every relationship worth keeping. Romantic partnerships, deep friendships, collaborative professional relationships, the ones that actually sustain and enrich your life, all of them have this at their core. You contribute to this by giving what you expect to receive, genuine interest in the other person's perspective, real consideration of their needs alongside your own, following through on what you say you'll do, acknowledging when you've made a mistake and addressing it honestly, celebrating what's good in them without needing them to be perfect. These are not concessions. They are the building blocks of the kind of connection that makes life worth living. And now, the mindset that holds all of it together. People who never tolerate disrespect, not as a performance, not as a set of practiced responses, but genuinely, naturally, sustainably, share a particular inner orientation. They have developed such a solid relationship with their own worth that external disrespect doesn't land the way it used to, not because they've stopped caring, not because they've built walls, but because they know something at a level so deep it doesn't need defending. They know they matter, not more than others, not because of what they've accomplished or what others think of them, simply because they're here, because they exist, and that is enough to deserve basic human dignity. From that place, disrespect reads differently. When someone is dismissive or unkind, it registers not as information about your value, but as information about theirs. Where they are in their own journey, what they're carrying, what they haven't yet worked out about themselves. You can hold that with something approaching compassion, not the kind that requires you to absorb their behavior, but the kind that keeps you from taking it personally. From that place, boundaries don't feel like confrontations. They feel like honesty. You're simply telling the truth about who you are and what works for you. There's no drama in it, no trembling uncertainty about whether you have the right. Just clear, grounded self-knowledge expressed in words. From that place, toxic relationships don't feel like losses you're forced to accept. They feel like mismatches, situations that aren't serving either person, that you have the clarity and the courage to step away from. And the space that opens up after you do doesn't feel empty. It feels like possibility. From that place, your energy goes toward building rather than defending, toward creating rather than protecting, toward the people and projects and experiences that genuinely light you up, rather than toward managing, surviving, and recovering from relationships and environments that cost you more than they give. This is not a destination you arrive at after reading something or completing a course. It's a practice you build over time, through thousands of small choices. Every time you speak up instead of swallowing it, every time you hold a limit instead of letting it slide, every time you choose your own peace over someone else's comfort with your compliance. Every single one of those moments is a brick, and the structure they build, slowly, imperfectly, genuinely, is a life in which respect is not something you fight for. It's just how things are, because you decided somewhere along the way, maybe starting right now, that you were worth it. Not someday. Not once you've fixed everything that needs fixing or become the person you think you should be. Now, as you are, worth it. That decision is the beginning of everything.